Hi, this is Linda with Watery Wishes, and today I have a multiple textural art journal page, and I used a fair few different things in this, but the medium of choice for colouring throughout most of it was these Liquitex Basics acrylic paints, which I got in a 48 tube set, and they are 22mm tubes, and they're decently priced. I bought this set because you can buy these paints individually, and this will give me a very good idea of which ones I use most often, so I don't have to spend a huge amount of money to get paints that I might not end up using. So here I am, just getting the paint on the page with my fingers and with the palette knife. I'm not too worried about it. It's just a matter of getting something down on the page. And now I have a brown paper bag that is leftover from my Simon Says stamp card kits. So figured I may as well use that for a bit of texture. Now this base layer that I'm doing is sort of, I'm setting the color for the page and the tone for the page, but I'm not really overly worried about it because a lot of this is going to be covered up and not as visible. I mean, some bits of it will be somewhat visible through it, but it's just adding a little bit more depth to the page. Here I am, I've coloured some gesso with one of the paints. I think it's unbleached titanium. And now I'm just softening it with a baby wipe. And this was to give it that very old vintagey feel. Now I lost a bit of footage here. I actually used this yellow cardstock and some pink cardstock as well, and I placed it over the page, and then I used that same paint that I just used before to blend them in. Now I've mixed a green and a grey colour, and I'm going to stencil that onto the page in a couple of places. And I know this is going to look really strange, the green on that beigey undertone, but bear with it. I'm just building up layers at the moment, and yes, the green does show in the final result, but it gives a nice bit of contrast. Now I'm using some various texture stamps. I've got two from one's from Craft and one is from Finnabar, and I'm using mostly second generation stamping, and I'm using the colours coffee and I think sepia in archival ink. And the other stamp, I think it's called Grunge, and it's from Craft. Now I'm adding some clear matte texture paste. Mostly over those green bits. And now that texture paste has dried, and I'm going to add some of these watered down acrylics into it so that they go down into the gaps and it brings that texture up. There was quite a liberal use of the heat tool in this step. All of which I'm not going to make you sit through, but you may get a peek of it here and there. Now I'm just softening those colours back a bit. This is a darker pink and a darker mustardy colour. They're darker than the colours I used in the original background. If you look towards the centre up the top on the right near the spine, you can see that lighter pink colour that I used, and this one's a much brighter pink. Now I've got some cotton material that I had left over from making my own little light box for photography, and I'm just dyeing that with the leftover paint. And that there is some it's a part of a crepe bandage that's old and way past its use by date. And now I'm applying a very, very thick layer of crackle paint in some spots on these two pages. Now I'm just colouring that crepe bandage. And now that the crackle paste has dried, I think it took around about 4 hours because I put a very, very thick layer on there, and the crackles are better if you don't use a heat tool on it. I've also discovered that if you use a heat tool on crackle paste, it's more susceptible to lift off your art piece. So here I'm adding some, I think this one is brass, but I'm not sure. And I'm putting that into the crackle, and now I'm adding a lavender colour. And I'm mostly putting the full strength paint down and rubbing it in, and then using some water to remove the bits on top and push it around a little bit. That seems to make the crackle a bit more visible than if you were to use watered down paint to start with. Now I have a little bit of cardstock that is cut with a vintage frame, vintage die, and I'm painting it to put that purple into some of the textural elements, or a shade of that purple into the textural elements. And I turned that piece of cloth around because I felt that the purple popped against the yellow ochre mustardy colour better than it did against the pink. And I felt that the pink also worked better in contrast with the green underneath all that texture. Now I lost a bit of this footage as well, but this is just Nina cardstock, and I'm using very minimal amounts of water and just quickly watercolouring in these images. This is another piece of crepe bandage. I felt that the top left corner was a little bit bare compared to the bottom right section of the art journal piece, so I thought I would balance that out a little bit by putting a couple of the textural elements up there. And this time you can see I've used the that lavender colour in the cotton to add that to the textural effect and to incorporate that colour a little bit more into the page. I'm just using a tacky glue, it's like a PVA glue. And I am actually adhering them down wet. They are still wet, and I had been waiting so long for texture paste and everything to dry that I thought, meh, it's on top of so much acrylic and texture paste, it'll be fine. So here I am adhering the fence, and this was a stamp set that came in a kit from Simon Says Stamp. The stamp set is still available. I will have a link to the stamp set down below and the main products. Like, I'm not going to link the cotton material that I had lying around or the crepe bandage, but the art supplies, I will try and get most of them named. There's a little cotton ball for the bunny's tail, and now I'm just trying to frame this piece, and I'm using some dye ink from Lawn Fawn, but I felt that it just wasn't giving me the effect that I wanted, so I pulled out one of my Pitt artist pens and used that as well. And I'm just rubbing that in with my finger too, and this ties in some of the darker text bits that are just visible in some parts of the piece. And that's the finished work. I really enjoyed playing with this. It was a lot of fun, a lot of different layers, and I was quite happy with the result. So if you liked the video, hit that like button. If you disliked it, show that you disliked it. If you did like it, I'd be really happy if you subscribed. I'm really glad for everyone that watches my videos and comments, and definitely my subscribers. So thank you. I'll see you guys in the next one, and don't forget, have fun crafting your imagination. Bye.